This is not a story about one day. This is not a story about one body or one pair of hands or one morning that happened once and never returned. This is a story about a rhythm older than memory, a rhythm that did not need to be remembered because it never left, a rhythm that repeated itself again and again, not because anyone chose it, but because there was nothing else. A rhythm of light and darkness, a rhythm of cold and warmth, a rhythm of silence and sound, a rhythm that passed through bodies the way breath passes through lungs, without asking, without stopping. Today, this rhythm unfolds again, quietly, without warning, without ceremony, from the first weak suggestion of light to the last coal breathing under ash, from one dawn to the next. Consciousness does not wake. It does not open its eyes. It does not decide to begin. Consciousness returns slowly, carefully, as if it had stepped away for a while and now finds its way back by touch alone. It returns first as weight, the weight of a body pressed into earth, the weight of hides resting heavily across shoulders and chest, the weight of stillness that has lasted for hours and does not yet wish to end. Warmth is present, but it is uneven. It gathers in places where bodies touch hides, where breath has been trapped, where yesterday's heat still lingers. Elsewhere, cold waits patiently. Cold presses upward from stone. Cold seeps through cracks in the ground, through the memory of night. Stone does not rush. Stone does not change. Stone simply holds its cold and offers it to whatever rests upon it. A hand lies open against the ground. The palm touches stone. The skin registers the difference between what is alive and what is not. Cold stone, unmoving stone. Stone that was cold before this body lay here and will be cold long after the body leaves. The hand does not withdraw. The hand accepts. Fingers curl slightly, not to grasp, but to acknowledge. The body breathes. Somewhere close, another body breathes as well. The sound of breathing fills the space, low and regular, a soft sound that does not demand attention. Breath enters, breath leaves, again, again. This sound has no meaning beyond itself. It is not listened to. It simply exists. The air is thick with smell. Old smoke clings to everything. Smoke from a fire that burned and then died, leaving only memory behind. The smell of smoke mixes with the smell of earth, with the smell of damp hides, with the faint smell of skin and hair and sleep. It is not unpleasant. It is familiar. It is the smell of inside, the smell of night that has not yet let go, the smell of darkness that still lingers even as morning approaches. Light has not entered yet. Light waits outside, but its presence is already felt. A subtle change, a thinning of darkness near the opening of the shelter, a slight difference in the way shadow gathers. The entrance is still a mouth filled with night, but its edges soften. A thin, almost imagined line of light begins to form. It does not warm. It does not reach inward. It simply marks a boundary. Here is inside. There is outside. Here is night. There will be day. The light does not hurry. It does not push. It waits just as stone waits, just as bodies wait. Shadow still dominates the space. Shadow pools in corners. Shadow fills the ceiling. Shadow wraps itself around limbs and hides details. In shadow, nothing is separate. Everything blends. Everything becomes mass and warmth and breath. Hands are only shapes. Faces are only darker areas within darkness. Shadow protects this sameness. Shadow holds the last pieces of night together. The body does not move. There's no reason to move yet. Movement would break something delicate. The fragile balance between sleep and waking, between darkness and light. A slight shift occurs, barely noticeable. A shoulder adjusts beneath the hide. A leg straightens a little. The hide slides with a soft sound. The sound is small, quickly absorbed by shadow. Silence remains intact. Consciousness continues to return in fragments, not thoughts, sensations, the awareness of where the body ends and the stone begins, the awareness of warmth trapped beneath hides, the awareness of cold waiting beyond them, the awareness of sound, breathing, distant, close, overlapping. There is no urgency. Morning does not demand action. Morning simply arrives and waits to be acknowledged. The thin line of light grows slightly brighter, still weak, still hesitant. It reaches the edge of the shelter and stops, as if respecting an unspoken boundary. It touches the ground just inside, revealing texture. Stone becomes visible as stone, not just coldness. Earth becomes visible as earth, cracked and uneven. The light reveals nothing new. It only confirms what hands already know. A hand flexes. Fingers move slowly as if testing the air. The air feels cool. The air feels heavy with night. The hand settles again. There will be time later for movement. Now there is only the slow completion of returning. Consciousness finishes fitting itself back into the body. Breath deepens slightly. The body is present now, fully present, still unmoving. This is how the day begins. Not with intention, not with decision, with sensation, with the quiet layering of cold and warmth, with shadow and the promise of light, with hands resting and sound breathing all around. Time does not move forward yet. It stretches, it expands, it lies flat like the stone beneath the body. The rhythm holds everything in place. Nothing needs to be done to keep it going. It has always moved on its own. Eventually, a change becomes unavoidable. The light strengthens just enough to demand acknowledgement. It is still pale, still cool, but it insists on being seen. Shadow retreats by a small measure. Details separate themselves from the whole. The entrance becomes an entrance. The inside becomes inside. The body becomes one body among others. A hand lifts from the stone. The skin feels warmer where it touched the ground, colder where it meets the air. The contrast is sharp for a moment, then fades. The hand moves toward the hides. Fingers grasp the edge. The texture is familiar, soft in places, rough in others, worn by use. The hide carries the smell of smoke deeply. It carries the smell of past nights, past mornings, past bodies. The hide is pulled aside slowly. Cold air slips in. It touches skin. The body reacts with a small tightening, a quiet adjustment. Warmth retreats inward. The body protects it. The movement creates a faint sound. Fabric against fabric. Hide against hide. Again, the sound is small. It does not disturb the others. Breathing remains steady. The shelter remains quiet. Sitting upright takes time. The body resists at first, heavy with sleep. Muscles stretch. Joints shift. Each movement is deliberate, slow, economical. There is no rush. There has never been a reason to hurry. The stone beneath feels different when weight shifts. Pressure changes. The cold redistributes itself. The body registers it without comment. Light reaches a little further inside now. It touches hands. It touches knees. It outlines shapes without filling them. Faces remain mostly hidden. Eyes do not look yet. They are open but unfocused. They receive light without interpreting it. The world is still mostly sensation. The hearth sits nearby. Ash lies thick and gray. It is quiet. It holds no flame, but it holds memory. Hands move toward it almost without direction. Not to act yet, only to be near. Hands hover above ash. The warmth is gone, but the idea of warmth remains. The ash does not resist the touch. It yields easily, coating fingers with fine gray dust. This dust carries yesterday. Yesterday's fire, yesterday's light, yesterday's sound of crackling wood. Hands brush ash aside gently. There is no need to hurry. Beneath the ash, darker shapes appear. Charcoal, remnants, blackened wood. These pieces are cold now, but they remember. Hands remember too. The body shifts closer to the hearth. Others begin to stir. Not awake yet, just moving within sleep. A shoulder rolls. A breath changes rhythm. The sound of breathing adjusts, overlaps, creates a new pattern. Still soft, still unbroken. Light grows steadier. The line that marked the entrance becomes a shape. Outside begins to exist as more than a concept. The world beyond the shelter waits, wet with dew, heavy with night, untouched by hands. Inside remains warmer. Inside remains held. Hands rest on knees. Ash clings to skin. The texture is fine, almost smooth. It dulls the shine of skin. It connects the body to fire even before fire returns. The hands are still. They wait. They have learned how to wait. Waiting is not absence of action. Waiting is part of the rhythm. A sound emerges from outside, not loud. A distant bird, a shift in air. The sound does not demand response. It simply joins the others. Breathing, subtle movement, the faint whisper of hides. The morning does not announce itself. It accumulates. The body leans forward. Weight shifts again. Stone responds with its cold. The ground does not care. It does not warm in response. It simply exists as it is. The body accepts this. Hands reach for wood. Dry pieces stacked nearby. Their surfaces are rough, splintered. They carry the smell of forest, of growth, of dryness. Hands know which pieces will work. They choose without thought. Wood is placed near the hearth, not in it yet, near it. Everything happens in small steps. Hands touch a stick, another. The texture of bark registers, rough against palm. A splinter threatens, then does not. Fingers adjust grip. The body leans closer. Warmth has not returned yet, but the promise of it draws the body inward. Light now fills the shelter enough to reveal faces. Eyes open fully. They do not search. They do not scan. They simply accept what is visible. Familiar shapes, familiar bodies. Nothing has changed. Everything is where it should be. A hand reaches for a second stick. Thinner, straighter, smooth from use. Hands bring the two together. The first movement is slow, testing, feeling resistance, feeling contact, wood against wood. The sound is faint, a dry whisper. The hands adjust angle, adjust pressure. Movement becomes more regular. A small circle, again, again. The sound grows slightly louder, still soft, still controlled. Hands focus on the feeling, the friction, the growing warmth hidden between surfaces. The hands do not rush. They have learned patience from stone, from night, from waiting for light. Smoke does not appear yet, but the smell begins to change. A subtle shift. Wood darkens at the point of contact. Hands notice. They continue. The rhythm becomes steady. The body leans in. Breath adjusts to movement. Inhale, exhale. The sound of breathing joins the sound of friction. The first hint of smoke appears. Thin, pale. It rises uncertainly, then disappears. Hands continue. They protect the moment. They shield the fragile beginning from stray air. Smoke returns, thicker now. It curls upward, hesitant. The smell deepens. The promise becomes real. Hands slow slightly. Control increases. A breath is directed carefully. Not too strong, not too weak. Smoke responds. It grows. The moment stretches. Everything narrows to this small space. Hands, wood, smoke, sound. Then light is born, not bright, not confident. A small glow appears, a living point. It flickers. It threatens to vanish. Hands close around it, creating shelter. Fingers cup. Air is guided. The glow strengthens. It becomes flame. Warmth appears suddenly but gently. It touches skin. It spreads. The body responds without thought. Shoulders relax. Breath deepens. The fire is small, but it is enough. It is everything. Wood is added carefully. One piece, then another. Flame grows. Sound changes. The soft whisper of fire begins. Crackling, low and steady. Light dances across surfaces. Shadow shifts, breaks apart, reforms. Warmth moves outward from the hearth. It touches knees, hands, faces. It pushes cold back. Not entirely, but enough. Enough to change the balance. Enough to signal the full arrival of morning. Others sit up now, slowly, one by one. Bodies adjust. Hides are pulled aside. Hands reach toward the fire. Palms open to warmth. No words are spoken. None are needed. Sound is enough. Light is enough. Warmth is enough. The rhythm continues. It always does. As the movement continues, smoke does not appear immediately, and this absence is expected, accepted, because the hands understand that the beginning of fire is not something to be forced, but something to be invited, something that arrives only when the moment is ready. The smell of the wood changes almost imperceptibly at first, darkening, deepening, and when the first thin trace of smoke finally rises, it does so hesitantly, curling upward and dissolving before it can become confident, as if unsure that it is welcome in the cool air that still belongs to night. The hands respond not by speeding up, but by becoming more careful, adjusting angle and pressure by fractions, sheltering the fragile beginning from stray currents of air. And in this careful attention, there is no thought of success or failure, only the continuation of a dialogue that has taken place countless times before, a quiet exchange between hands, wood, and patience. Breath slows slightly, aligning itself with the movement, and the sound of breathing grows deeper, steadier, as if the body itself is preparing to receive warmth again. When the first small flame finally appears, it is not dramatic, not bright, not triumphant, but modest and uncertain, a faint point of light that trembles at the edge of existence, and the hands immediately respond by closing around it, not to claim it, but to protect it, creating a small pocket of space where warmth can begin to gather without being torn away. In this moment, shadow shifts subtly across the walls of the shelter, not retreating entirely, but rearranging itself, making room for the presence of light without abandoning its hold. As the flame is fed carefully, piece by piece, it grows into itself, becoming steadier, more assured, and the sound of fire begins to emerge, a gentle crackling that does not dominate the space but enriches it, adding another layer to the morning soundscape. Warmth spreads outward from the hearth, first touching the hands that have worked to bring it into being, then reaching knees, faces, and chests, loosening the stiffness left behind by the cold of stone and night. The vessel that waits nearby is lifted with the same unhurried care, its rough surface cool against the palms, its weight familiar and grounding. And when water is poured into it, the sound changes again, becoming fuller, rounder, echoing softly within the clay as cold water meets cold earth. Grains are added slowly, falling with small, nearly identical sounds that disappear almost as soon as they are made, followed by pieces of root whose pale surfaces briefly catch the light before sinking beneath the water's surface. The vessel is placed near the fire, close enough to feel warmth, but not so close as to hurry what needs time. And as the water inside begins its long transition, the hands remain nearby, resting on knees or hovering briefly above the vessel, feeling the subtle rise in temperature long before any visible change occurs. Steam does not appear at once, and this waiting is part of the ritual, part of the exchange that turns cold silence into internal warmth. And during this time, the shelter fills with the quiet presence of bodies that have fully woken now, sitting upright, adjusting hides, extending hands toward the fire without speaking. Light continues to strengthen outside, filtering in through the entrance and touching more surfaces within, revealing textures that had remained hidden in shadow, while still leaving enough darkness to keep the space soft and enclosed. The first wisps of steam eventually rise, thin and almost apologetic, carrying with them a new quality of warmth that moves upward and outward, brushing against faces and hands and changing the smell of the air, signaling that food is no longer an idea but a reality approaching. When the vessel is finally lifted and held between both hands, the warmth it carries is immediate and undeniable, traveling from clay to skin, from skin into muscle and bone, and settling deep within the body in a way that no external fire ever could. Eating is slow, uncelebrated, and quiet, because the purpose of the meal is not pleasure or fullness, but the restoration of warmth, the reinforcement of the inner fire that will sustain movement later in the day. As the vessel is set aside and the fire allowed to continue breathing on its own, the morning feels complete in a way that has nothing to do with time and everything to do with balance. And in this balance, light and shadow, sound and silence, hands and warmth exist together without conflict, each taking its place in the rhythm that has already begun to carry the day forward. Leaving the shelter does not feel like leaving a place so much as it feels like allowing the body to continue moving in the direction it was already leaning toward. Because the boundary between inside and outside is thin at this hour, softened by light that has grown wide and even, and by air that still carries traces of night. And when the body steps forward, it does so without marking the moment, without hesitation, simply following the quiet instruction that is formed somewhere beneath thought. The first contact with the ground outside is unmistakable, as moisture transfers itself immediately to skin and hides, and grass bends under the weight of feet that do not try to avoid it, accepting instead the cold wetness that climbs slowly toward the ankles. A reminder that warmth, though present now inside the body, is not permanent and must be renewed again and again through movement, through fire, through the work of hands. The air outside feels different, more open, less contained, and sound behaves differently here, spreading outward rather than returning from stone walls, carrying with it the distant calls of birds, the faint shifting of wind through plants, and the soft, nearly constant rustle that comes from a world that is always moving even when it appears still. Light lies low across the land, not sharp and not demanding, but wide and generous, touching everything evenly so that no single object stands out more than another. And in this light, the landscape does not present itself as scenery or destination, but simply as a surface to be crossed, a familiar arrangement of ground, plants, and stone that the body recognizes without naming. Seeds drift through the air, small pale shapes carried without intention, and their slow movement mirrors the pace of walking, reinforcing the sense that nothing here needs to hurry, that the rhythm of the day will unfold regardless of how quickly or slowly the feet move. The path itself is not visible, not marked by signs or cleared by repeated passage, yet it exists fully in the memory of the body, guiding each step through subtle shifts in weight and balance, around patches of softer ground and toward firmer surfaces, and the hands hanging loosely at the sides swing slightly with each movement, already anticipating the work they will soon perform even though they remain empty for now. Breathing settles into a steady pattern, matching the pace of walking, and the sound of it becomes part of the surrounding soundscape, indistinguishable from wind or distant movement. Another quiet expression of life continuing as it always has. As the shelter recedes behind, it does not disappear but becomes simply another shape among many, held in peripheral awareness rather than focus. And ahead the land begins to rise almost imperceptibly, the ground firming underfoot as stone approaches the surface. And with this change comes a subtle shift in attention, not conscious but embodied, as the hands grow slightly more alert, fingers flexing once or twice as if remembering what they will soon need to do. The cliff does not reveal itself all at once, but emerges gradually, first as a change in texture underfoot, then as a pale presence in the distance, and finally as a solid, undeniable mass of stone that has waited here through countless cycles of light and shadow. Standing before the cliff, the body does not pause in reverence or assessment, because this place is neither new nor remarkable, but simply one of many that hold what is needed, and the hands reach out almost immediately, touching the chalky surface, feeling its dryness, its coolness, its quiet indifference to the presence of skin. Stone does not respond to touch, yet it communicates through resistance, through the way it yields or refuses to yield. And the hands read these signals without thought, sliding along the surface, searching for the place that feels right, not chosen, but recognized. When the first strike comes, it does so without ceremony, a controlled movement guided by memory rather than force, and the sound it produces is sharp and clean, traveling outward before returning faintly, altered by distance and shape. And in this sound the hands hear not success or failure, but information. A small flake breaks free and falls to the ground, landing among others left by previous visits, and the hands do not rush to pick it up, allowing it to rest where it fell, as the stone itself seems to suggest what should come next. The core is turned slightly, adjusted by a fraction, and another strike follows, its angle changed just enough to invite a different response. And again the sound carries meaning, telling the hands whether they have listened well or need to adjust further. This process is slow not because it is difficult, but because it requires attention of a particular kind, the kind that cannot be hurried without losing its accuracy. And in this attention, the mind remains quiet, occupied entirely by sensation and response. Stone dust settles on skin and hair, lightening the surface of the hands, marking them with pale traces that will remain until washed away by time or movement. And as flakes accumulate at the feet, they create a small field of sharpness, each piece holding the potential for future work, for cutting, scraping, shaping, and yet at this moment they are simply present, evidence of a conversation taking place between hands and stone. Shadow shifts with each movement of the arms, briefly breaking and reforming across the cliff face. while light flashes along newly exposed edges, highlighting their sharpness before settling back into stillness. There is no sense of progress measured in quantity or speed, because enough is defined not by number, but by feeling, by the moment when the hands recognize that what is needed has been gathered. And until that moment arrives, the work continues, strike after measured strike, adjustment after subtle adjustment, guided entirely by the feedback of sound, resistance, and balance. The body remains steady throughout, feet planted firmly, weight shifting only when necessary, conserving energy and maintaining a posture that allows the hands to move freely without strain. Eventually, a flake breaks free that carries a different quality, longer and more regular, its edge catching the light in a way that signals usefulness. And when the hands lift it, they do so carefully, testing its sharpness with a light touch, feeling the potential stored along its length. This piece will cut cleanly, will serve well, and it joins others already set aside, wrapped or held securely so their edges do not damage skin or hides. When the hands finally turn away from the cliff, there is no sense of completion or finality, only a quiet readiness to move on, and the body shifts direction smoothly, retracing the invisible path back toward the shelter without looking back. The land receives the feet again, grass bending and rising behind them, dew transferring itself once more to skin, and the air feels warmer now, less heavy with night, as light continues its steady climb. Sound changes subtly on the return, as the distant hum of life grows slightly more pronounced, and the rhythm of walking remains unchanged, unhurried, steady, allowing the body to integrate the work just completed without interruption. Hands carry their gathered pieces close, aware of their presence without focusing on them, and as the shelter comes back into view, it does so gradually, blending back into the arrangement of shapes and shadows that define the camp. Approaching the familiar space, the body does not accelerate because there is no urgency to arrive. And when the boundary between outside and inside is crossed again, it happens as quietly as before, marked only by a slight change in sound and temperature. The fire's presence is felt before it is seen, a gentle warmth that reaches outward, and the hands respond by loosening slightly, relaxing their grip now that the sharp work is finished. The gathered stone is set aside carefully, placed where it can be found again without effort, and the hands linger for a moment, resting on the ground, feeling once more the difference between cold stone and living skin before withdrawing. The body settles back among others, movement slowing naturally as the demands of the moment recede, and the rhythm of the day continues uninterrupted, carrying with it the quiet knowledge that what was needed has been taken, not all, but enough, and that the balance between effort and rest has been maintained once again. The return to the camp does not complete anything and does not begin anything new, because by the time the body settles again among familiar shapes, the day has already entered the long middle stretch where movement slows, not because of tiredness, but because there is no pressure pushing it forward. Light now rests more fully across the land, no longer tentative, no longer testing its reach, and in doing so it changes the quality of everything it touches, softening edges, warming surfaces, and allowing shadow to withdraw without disappearing entirely. The fire continues to exist, but it no longer calls attention to itself, breathing quietly in the background, its sound reduced to an occasional crackle that blends easily into the broader sound of insects, distant wind, and the low, continuous presence of breathing bodies. Warmth spreads not in waves now, but in layers, settling into skin and muscle and remaining there without effort, creating a state in which the body feels neither cold nor hot, but simply held. Hands, no longer occupied with stone or flame, begin to move toward other materials that wait nearby. Reeds gathered earlier and left in loose bundles, their pale surfaces already dry and light from exposure to air. The hands reach for them without thought, fingers separating one from another, testing flexibility, remembering pressure, and as the first reed bends, it does so with a familiar resistance that requires just enough force to guide without breaking. The weaving begins not as a decision, but as a continuation of motion, one reed crossing another, over and under, creating the beginnings of a pattern that no one has designed and no one will name, a pattern born entirely from repetition and habit. Fingers move with a steadiness that belongs to memory rather than intention, adjusting tension automatically, correcting small irregularities before they become visible. And in this motion, there is no awareness of progress, only the quiet satisfaction of movement sustaining itself. The sound produced by this work is minimal, a faint, dry rasp as reed touches reed, quickly absorbed by the surrounding air, joining the hum of flies that drift lazily through the space, landing briefly on skin or material before lifting away again. The flies do not hurry, and their sound, a steady, low vibration, becomes part of the atmosphere, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, simply present, reinforcing the sense that life continues everywhere at once, unconcerned with individual actions. Children sit closer to the ground, their bodies naturally drawn toward earth, hands pressing into clay that has been gathered and kept moist, its coolness contrasting gently with the warmth that fills the air. The clay yields easily, responding immediately to pressure, and small forms begin to emerge without plan or expectation. Rounded shapes that suggest bodies or animals without needing to resemble anything specific. These figures exist only for the moment of their making, and the hands that shape them do so without attachment, pressing, smoothing, reshaping, unconcerned with what will remain later. An older body sits slightly apart, where the light falls most directly, skin absorbing warmth slowly, deeply, and hands move through dry grass with no purpose beyond sensation, fingers closing around stems and releasing them again, feeling texture and resistance without seeking to gather or collect. The grass breaks softly when bent too far, producing a brief sound that vanishes immediately, leaving no trace except the altered position of a few strands. Time here does not move forward in any measurable way, because nothing marks its passage except subtle changes in light and shadow that register in the body before they register in the eyes. Breathing remains slow, deep, unforced, and occasionally several breaths aligned by chance, creating a temporary shared rhythm that dissolves just as quietly. No one looks to the sky, no one checks the sun, because the day does not need to be tracked. It unfolds at its own pace, indifferent to attention. The woven mat grows gradually, almost invisibly, length increasing by increments too small to notice individually. And when the hands pause, it is not because the work is finished, but because there is no immediate reason to continue. The reeds rest across knees, fingers remain loosely curled, and the body settles into stillness without effort, accepting the pause as naturally as it accepted the movement before it. Shadow begins to change its shape again, lengthening almost imperceptibly, gathering beneath objects, then behind them. And the quality of light shifts from wide and even to slightly heavier, more angled, warming one side of the body more than the other. This change is felt as a gentle difference in temperature rather than seen, and the body responds by shifting position slightly, seeking balance without conscious intent. The fire becomes more noticeable again as the light outside slowly thins, not because it has grown brighter, but because it now contrasts more clearly with the surrounding space. Its sound remains soft, steady, reassuring, and hands will return to it soon, but not yet. The quiet hours do not end sharply. They loosen, thin, and begin to dissolve, giving way to the next phase of the rhythm without ever fully disappearing. The change does not begin in the sky, and it is not announced by color or by any single noticeable shift, but arrives first as a subtle alteration in weight, as if the day itself has grown heavier and begun to settle downward, pressing gently against the land and against the bodies that move upon it. Light is still present, still widespread, but it has lost something of its openness, its earlier generosity, and in its place there is now a quiet narrowing, a sense that the world is slowly turning its attention elsewhere. The sun does not move in a way that can be followed directly, and no one looks toward it to measure its position, yet its influence is felt everywhere at once, in the way surfaces begin to hold warmth less willingly, in the way skin cools more quickly when shadow passes over it, and in the way sound seems to carry a little farther as the air grows denser. The body recognizes this change without naming it, adjusting posture, shifting weight, drawing hands closer to the torso, all without conscious decision, responding to the same rhythm that has guided movement since morning. Colors are the first to loosen their hold, not disappearing suddenly but thinning, becoming less insistent, as if retreating inward. And what remains appears flatter, quieter, less distinct, until objects that once stood apart begin to resemble one another more closely. The grass loses its variation, becoming a single surface rather than many individual blades, and the earth takes on a uniform tone that blends seamlessly with stone, while the sky itself softens, its brightness spreading thinner and thinner across a widening space. Shadow grows at the edges of things, at first barely noticeable, collecting beneath rocks, beneath the shelter, beneath the bodies that sit or stand in one place for too long. And these small shadows gradually lengthen, stretching outward, reaching across the ground until they touch one another and begin to merge. What were once many separate shapes become fewer, larger forms, and the world simplifies itself, offering less detail to the eyes and more to the body, which now feels changes before it sees them. Hands pause more often during this time, lingering in stillness between movements, resting on knees, on the ground, on the rough surfaces of tools or vessels, as if conserving warmth without realizing it. The skin of the hands grows slightly cooler, especially where it is exposed to air, and this sensation prompts small adjustments, fingers curling, palms turning inward, sleeves or hides drawn a little closer, not in response to discomfort, but in anticipation of it. The soundscape shifts as well, though it does not become quieter so much as it becomes more focused, with fewer overlapping sounds and more space between them, allowing each to stand out briefly before fading. Insects hum more insistently for a time, their sound rising and falling without pattern, while birds call less frequently, their voices traveling farther in the cooling air, creating a sense of distance that was absent earlier in the day. The fire, which had remained present but unobtrusive through the quiet hours, begins to draw attention again, not because it demands it, but because the contrast between its warmth and the cooling surroundings grows more pronounced. Its light becomes more visible, flickering against stone and hide, carving out small pockets of brightness within the encroaching shadow. And the body responds by drifting closer, one step at a time, narrowing the space between skin and flame without ever consciously deciding to do so. As the sun lowers further, its light does not so much fade as it changes direction, sliding sideways across the land, stretching shadows into long, deliberate shapes that move slowly but relentlessly toward the shelter. Trees cast lines that creep across the ground, crossing paths and overlapping until they lose their individual origins, becoming part of a single, expanding darkness that seems to gather strength with each passing moment. There is a brief time when light and shadow exist in balance, when neither dominates and the world feels suspended between states. And during this interval, everything appears flattened and quiet, as if waiting for a signal that never comes. Faces are still visible, but lack detail, reduced to planes of light and dark, and hands become silhouettes against the fire, their movements traced only by the shifting glow that outlines fingers and knuckles. Eventually, even this balance dissolves, and the light continues to withdraw, pulled away not by disappearance, but by the slow turning of the world itself, as if the land is deliberately presenting its back to the sun. Colors drain almost completely now, leaving behind variations of gray, blue, and brown, and what remains of the sky grows deeper, its brightness concentrated in a narrower band that hugs the horizon before thinning further. Shadows finally lose their edges, no longer distinct shapes, but a single unified presence that fills space without needing to announce itself, swallowing details, smoothing textures, and simplifying the world until only the most essential forms remain. The shelter becomes a darker mass within darkness, the bodies near it blending together, their outlines softening as individuality gives way to proximity and shared warmth. The first stars appear not as a sudden event, but as isolated points that seem almost accidental, small pinpricks of light that test the darkness cautiously before allowing more to follow. These early stars are few and widely spaced, and they do not yet alter the quality of the night, serving instead as distant markers, reminders of a larger rhythm unfolding far beyond the reach of hands or fire. The fire itself changes character as night approaches, becoming less a tool and more a presence, its flame rising and falling with a gentler movement, its sound settling into a steady, reassuring pattern that invites attention without demanding it. Wood is added carefully, not to make the fire larger, but to ensure its continuity, and the hands that feed it do so with familiarity and restraint, understanding that this fire is not meant for work now, but for watching. Warmth gathers again, more tightly than before, drawing bodies into closer arrangements, shoulders nearly touching, knees angled inward, hands resting nearer to shared heat. And in this closeness, there is no sense of crowding or discomfort, only the quiet efficiency of bodies responding to the same environmental cues. Breathing becomes more audible in the cooler air, each exhale briefly visible as a soft cloud before dissolving, adding another layer of movement to the scene. Sound at this hour is sparse but distinct, with each noise carrying more weight. Whether it is the crackle of wood, the shift of a body settling into a more comfortable position, or the distant call of an animal beginning its own cycle of night activity. These sounds do not interrupt the silence but shape it, giving it form and texture, allowing it to exist as something substantial rather than empty. As darkness deepens, the fire becomes the primary source of light, its glow defining a small, contained world within which everything feels immediate and tangible. While beyond its reach, the land dissolves into suggestion and imagination. Hands move within this light slowly, deliberately, their gestures elongated by shadow, each motion leaving a brief after-image as flame flickers and changes. And watching these movements requires no effort, no interpretation, only presence. The last traces of daylight finally disappear, not with finality, but with a quiet acceptance, and the sky settles into its deeper state, stars becoming more numerous, their collective presence forming patterns that are not named or followed, but simply acknowledged. The world has turned fully away from the sun now, and what remains is not absence but a different form of fullness, one defined by closeness, warmth, and shared stillness. The day does not end in this moment, because it has not been a single thing that can end, but it does loosen its hold, releasing the urgency of light and allowing the slower rhythm of night to take over, preparing bodies and senses for the inward turn that will follow. The fire continues to breathe. The shadow holds everything it touches, and the last light fades not as a loss, but as a transition, making room for what comes next. Darkness does not arrive all at once, and it does not fall from above as something separate from the world, but instead rises slowly from the ground, from the spaces between objects, from the shadows that have already claimed their territory, and now expand quietly until there is nowhere left for light to rest. What remains visible does so only by agreement, by the permission of fire and starlight, and even these sources offer no sharp clarity, only enough illumination to suggest form without insisting on detail. The fire has changed again, its flames shorter now, closer to the fuel, their movements slower and more deliberate, as if conserving energy for the long hours ahead. Its sound is softer, a low, steady murmur punctuated by the occasional settling of wood. And this sound becomes a constant presence, something the body leans into without realizing, using it as an anchor in the growing darkness. Bodies shift closer together, not abruptly, not all at once, but through a series of small adjustments that seem insignificant on their own, yet collectively alter the arrangement of the space. A shoulder moves a little nearer to warmth, a knee turns inward, a back curves slightly more, and hides are drawn up and over skin in slow, careful motions that avoid unnecessary exposure to the cooling air. The ground beneath absorbs sound, taking in the weight of bodies as they lower themselves onto familiar places, the texture of earth and stone pressing into hips and shoulders in ways that are known and accepted. There is no search for perfect comfort, only for positions that allow stillness to be maintained without effort. And once found, these positions are held with quiet determination. Breathing grows more audible now, not because it has become labored, but because the night carries sound more efficiently, allowing each inhale and exhale to travel farther before dissolving. These breaths do not align perfectly, yet over time they begin to influence one another, speeding or slowing in subtle ways until a loose, shared rhythm emerges, not synchronized but compatible, like overlapping waves that never fully merge. Hands find resting places, palms against skin, against hides, against the ground, fingers curling slightly as muscles relax, releasing the tension required for tool and fire earlier in the day. The warmth held in the hands gradually disperses, spreading upward through arms and into the chest, creating a sense of internal heat that lingers even as the surrounding air cools. Sound from beyond the circle of fire becomes more noticeable, not louder but more distinct against the simplified backdrop of night. Insects continue their work, their buzzing intermittent and uneven, while farther away an animal calls, its voice rising and falling in a pattern that does not signal danger, but simply presence. This sound is answered eventually by another, more distant call, and together they form a loose dialogue that belongs entirely to the darkness. The stars overhead multiply slowly, filling the sky with points of light that do not illuminate the ground, but instead draw attention upward, away from the immediate world of warmth and bodies. These stars are not counted or named. They exist as a scattered texture, a reminder of depth and distance that contrasts with the close, contained space around the fire. Thought does not disappear, but it loses its sharp edges, becoming softer, more fluid, less interested in sequence or clarity. Images surface briefly, fragments of movement or sensation from the day, the feel of stone under hands, the smell of smoke, the sound of water, but these images do not connect into stories and do not demand interpretation. They drift through awareness and fade without resistance. Sleep approaches not as a single wave, but as a series of gentle advances and retreats. Moments when the body relaxes deeply only to return briefly to awareness, then sinks again. In these intervals, the line between waking and sleeping blurs, and the world becomes a collection of sensations without clear boundaries. Warmth, pressure, sound, and darkness blending into a continuous field. The fire's glow pulses softly, casting moving shadows across closed eyelids, and these shifting patterns become part of the inner landscape, influencing dreams that are not yet fully formed. Breathing continues, steady and reassuring, both one's own and that of others nearby. And this shared sound becomes the primary measure of time, replacing the sun and the sky. Occasionally a body stirs, adjusting position, drawing a hide closer, releasing a quiet exhale that sounds almost like a sigh. And these small movements ripple through the group without breaking the overall stillness. The night accepts these disruptions easily, absorbing them and returning quickly to its steady state. The cold does not press aggressively, but remains present at the edges, a reminder of the world beyond warmth, encouraging bodies to remain close and still. Skin cools where it is exposed, while areas in contact with others retain heat, creating a patchwork of sensation that shifts slowly over time as positions change. Awareness narrows further, focusing less on external sound and more on internal rhythm, the rise and fall of the chest, the subtle movements of muscles as they relax completely, and the feeling of weight sinking downward, as if the body is being gently pulled into the ground. In this state, the distinction between self and surroundings becomes less important, replaced by a general sense of belonging to the space. Dreams, when they come, are light and fragmentary, composed of sensations rather than narratives, flashes of warmth, pressure, movement, and sound that do not connect or resolve. These dreams do not surprise or disturb. They simply pass through like clouds moving across a dark sky, leaving no trace once they have gone. The fire continues to burn low, its fuel chosen carefully to last through the night, and its presence ensures that darkness never becomes absolute, always holding a small center of light and warmth around which everything else is arranged. This center is not guarded consciously. It is trusted, maintained by habit and experience rather than vigilance. At some point, awareness thins so much that it becomes difficult to say whether the body is asleep or awake, whether time is passing quickly or slowly, or whether anything is changing at all. The world feels suspended, held in a state of quiet continuity that does not require attention to persist. Breathing remains the constant, the one sensation that continues uninterrupted, guiding the body through the night, marking the passage of time without measuring it. Each breath is similar to the last, yet each is slightly different, influenced by dreams, by temperature, by the subtle movements of others nearby. The distant animal calls fade and return, insects quiet and resume, and the fire shifts and settles, all without breaking the overall sense of calm. These sounds weave together into a loose, ever-changing composition that belongs entirely to the night and does not need to be understood to be accepted. Eventually, the body sinks fully into sleep, or perhaps it simply stops noticing the difference between sleeping and waking, and in this state the night continues its work, carrying everything forward without urgency. Darkness holds, warmth remains, breath follows breath, and somewhere beyond awareness, the world turns slowly toward the place where the first light will appear again, just as it has countless times before, ready to begin the rhythm once more. Thank you for watching and listening. If this slow journey helped you relax, unwind, or drift toward sleep, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps support the creation of more calm, research-inspired history for sleep. Sweet dreams, and thank you for being here.